If there is a new assignment on the bulletin board, you can investigate that story. If there is no new assignment, finish working on your current story. You can also select I just received word that the Continental Army has evolved into a skilled professional military force.
The Continental Army has really been not much more than a group of starving, ragged amateur soldiers. They have certainly not proved to be much of a match for the British on the battlefield.
That has been true up until now. So I need you to find out how the morale and fighting capabilities of the Continental Army have been improved.
Sounds as though Britain might have a real challenge winning this war now. Let's go find out the details.
We need to find out all the details.
Why do you suppose General Washington chose such a cold place for his winter encampment?
Now that sounds like an excellent question for the general. Not a lot of difference between the officers' quarters and the soldiers' quarters.
The officers' quarters are just a bit less crowded.
Aren't you the Marquis de Lafayette, one of the richest men in France?
James, General Lafayette is of French nobility.
Yes, but now I am here in America. I was drawn here by the American struggle for independence. I've come to aid the states as a volunteer.
May we ask you a few questions? Moses of the Pennsylvania Gazette sent us to find out about the recent improvements in the morale and professionalism of the Continental Army.
I have only recently returned here myself. In fact, I'm waiting for General Gates to send my trunk to camp so I can get settled. But once I've received my trunk, I could answer a few questions.
Could we locate General Gates and bring the trunk to you?
If you'll deliver my trunk to me, I'll let General Washington know you are here. Surely he will be able to provide you with plenty of information.
General Washington was once a surveyor. Traveling through uninhabited country must have taught him how to survive in unfamiliar environments.
Yes, his experiences in the French and Indian War taught him to be resourceful as well.
His whole life seems to have led him to becoming a skilled commander-in-chief.
The generals rented houses for their winter quarters.
Yes, I've heard General Washington's wife, Martha, spends every winter with him. Quite romantic, don't you think?
Please, Sarah, this is an army encampment. A jackknife.
I must finish this report to Congress. Please come back later.
After that long, cold journey, the soldiers were expected to build huts as soon as they arrived.
When the alternative was sleeping in the snow, even the most exhausted soldier must have found the strength.
Yes, but I heard that General Washington also offered money to the first group to finish its hut. These huts do look rather damp and smoky.
They contributed to the unhealthy living conditions here in camp.
Yes, I've heard that as many as 3,000 soldiers died here, or in nearby temporary hospitals.
What caused the death of so many soldiers? Did they starve?
No, diseases such as dysentery, typhoid, and smallpox killed them.
Then General Washington saved lives when he insisted the troops be inoculated against smallpox. Well, well, a newspaper. It's not the Pennsylvania Gazette, but at least it will have some news.
Sir, we're from the Pennsylvania Gazette.
Pennsylvania, huh? Myself, I'm from Connecticut. I'm used to these cold winters.
You're a slave?
I was, but I'm confident now that my future, as well as this country's, is one of freedom.
Well, we'd like to ask you a few questions about the improved morale in the Continental Army.
Yes, when we first arrived, we were hungry all the time, but much has changed since then.
May we ask you a few questions?
Certainly, but before I get too comfortable, I want to go get a new pair of boots. A supply wagon was abandoned last winter, and the men tell me that there are still some good boots packed inside. The boots I'm wearing are worn through.
We can go get those boots for you. I've heard stories of the suffering the troops faced when they arrived here.
I've heard tales of men without boots leaving bloody footprints in the snow, and stories of a chant.
No meat, no coat, no flour, no soldier. Sounds like some soldiers were about to leave. General von Steuben? Ben Franklin's associate, Moses of the Pennsylvania Gazette, sent us to find out more about the new professionalism in the Continental Army.
Is that the same Ben Franklin who introduced me to General Washington as a lieutenant general in the Prussian army?
The same. He exaggerated your credentials a bit because he realized that an officer trained by the Prussian army could help General Washington discipline the troops.
Discipline is easy when the officers gain the love of their men. They must put their soldiers' needs first. But how can I help you?
We'd like to find out more about this discipline. It's true. The soldiers came here as little more than a mob of amateurs.
Yes, I'll be happy to tell you what I know. In fact, I am writing a manual of regulations about the techniques I've developed. You'll need to go retrieve it, though. A soldier has borrowed it to do a bit of studying.
What led to the shortages in food and supplies?
I've heard the army supply system failed and...
The decline in the value of the continental currency made farmers reluctant to sell to the army.
Sarah, why do you ask a question when you already know the answer?
Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is James. We're with the Pennsylvania Gazette.
I am Polly Cooper. My people are the Oneida, the people of the Standing Stone. I am here to aid the Continental Army.
In that case, have you noticed an increased morale and professionalism in the army recently?
Yes, much has changed here in camp since I arrived.
What can you tell us about the changes you've seen?
I can tell you a bit, but first I must find my knapsack. I used it to carry some medicine to a nearby farmer who was ill. I believe I may have left the knapsack near his barn.
We'll find your knapsack and bring it back to you.
12 men share this hut.
12 men in a space only 14 feet by 16 feet.
Would these quarters seem a little tight for you? A soldier's uniform. Not many of the American soldiers had uniforms. They simply wore whatever they had. Hello, we're James.
And Sarah. We're from the Pennsylvania Gazette.
We'd like to ask you a few questions. Have you noticed a recent change in the morale and discipline of the soldiers?
Yes. The soldiers seem like a real army now. They aren't the same discouraged lot they were when we arrived, that's for certain.
May we ask you a few questions?
Yes, but I must mend these uniforms while we talk. I sent a young boy to buy a thimble, but he has not returned.
We'll go find the boy and bring back a thimble.
At one point, almost 3,000 men were listed as unfit for duty because they lacked proper clothing.
They had no shirts, boots, or blankets.
And at the coldest time of the year.
I must finish this report to...
Until recently, there were several American military stores in this area.
Unfortunately, when the British discovered them, they took the supplies and burned the buildings.
Look, an abandoned supply wagon. This must be another explanation for the supply shortage.
Yes, I've heard the roads were often unpassable to wagons because of the mud and water.
A good pair of boots.
Unfortunately, not all American soldiers have boots.
We're entering York, right?
Yes, when the British took over Philadelphia, Congress moved here.
Before I get too comfortable, thank you. It's good to put on a pair of new boots. If I could ask just one more small favor, perhaps you could deliver a manual of regulations to General von Steuben. He's writing this manual based on his experiences training the soldiers here. I was just doing a bit of catching up. I've set it on the floor.
Who helped improve the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
I noticed the change when I returned from a foraging party. You know, foraging is nothing more than seizing supplies from farmers, at the point of a bayonet if necessary, but we would have perished otherwise. A Prussian military officer named General von Steuben changed our training methods and improved camp sanitation. Our respect for General Washington also pulled us through until Quartermaster General Greene got us much-needed supplies.
What led to the improvements in the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
After I returned from foraging, I was kept constantly engaged in learning the new Prussian military exercises designed to make us more effective soldiers. Von Steuben's methods of training and discipline were just what the Army needed.
When did the improvements to the morale and discipline of the Continental Army occur?
I keep a diary so I won't forget important dates. I'm uncertain of the exact date things began because I was still out foraging. I know that it was the end of February when General von Steuben showed up and started training the troops. Things started getting better soon after, and I had a lot of catching up to do when I returned.
Where was the Continental Army when it improved in morale and discipline?
All I know is that we didn't get supplies here most of the winter.
Why was it so important that the morale and discipline of the Continental Army be improved?
I suppose we'll leave the camp soon. There's a rumor that the British may abandon Philadelphia. I think when the British see our new professional army, we may give the British some concern.
A copy of Baron von Steuben's military training manual. He has a lot of experience training soldiers.
I'm writing a manual of regulations. Dankeschön. Thank you. You can refer to this manual of regulations when you want additional details.
Who helped improve the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
The credit goes to every man in this camp. I began by training a model company of 100 chosen men. When these men were fully trained, each taught another group.
What led to the improvements in the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
Before I arrived, the camp was unsanitary and the men were miserable. The troops did not know how to maneuver on the battlefield. The soldiers received coordinated training and discipline from the officers, which gave them confidence. They became an organized military force. Better sanitation reduced illness. Plus, food and supplies began to arrive at the camp.
When did the improvements to the morale and discipline of the Continental Army occur?
An exact date would be a guess, because these sorts of changes happen gradually. I arrived in this country last fall, but I didn't come to the camp until February. It wasn't long after that the soldiers began to take pride in themselves.
Where was the Continental Army when it improved in morale and discipline?
The change happened in the hearts and hands of these soldiers. We've cleaned up the garbage in the camp, arranged the tents in rows, and placed the kitchens and latrines on opposite sides.
Why was it so important that the morale and discipline of the Continental Army be improved?
I am writing a manual of drills and exercises based on the plan I devised. The troops now have the skills, equipment, and drive to defeat the British in open battle via a modern 18th century military organization.
With so many sick soldiers, temporary hospitals were set up all over the area.
Yes, barns, homes, and churches were all used as makeshift hospitals.
A knapsack, very useful for carrying things on a journey.
A barn couldn't make for a very sanitary hospital.
Especially with the shortage of supplies and medical staff.
Let's look around here and get back. I don't want you to become ill, James. I just read a pamphlet blaming General Washington for every failure of Congress.
It appears some are trying to turn the public against General Washington.
And replace him with a new commander-in-chief. So, while the soldiers were starving, it appears the rest of America had plenty to eat.
Unfortunately, you're correct. Many farmers are reluctant to sell their produce for continental currency.
You mean they aren't eager to be paid with worthless continental dollars?
Well, as long as we're here, we may as well eat.
Good thing you didn't have to endure the starvation of the American camp. You'd never survive on fire cakes.
A paste of flour and water cooked on hot stones? No thanks. General Gates? Remember us? James and Sarah from the Pennsylvania Gazette.
James, Sarah, yes. You met with me right after my victory at Saratoga.
Yes. This time we need to find out about the increased confidence and professionalism in the Continental Army.
I've heard rumors to that effect. How can I help you?
May we ask you a few questions?
I may be able to tell you a few things. However, I am awaiting a message from Congress. It seems they do not want to invade Canada, as I recommended. The message may have been delivered to a home here in town.
We'd be happy to go retrieve that message for you, General Gates.
A message.
I am awaiting a message from... As I suspected, the invasion of Canada will not occur. Perhaps you would not mind delivering this trunk by the table to the Marquis De Lafayette. He was to be commander-in-chief of the invasion, but I will not require his services now.
Who helped improve the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
Don't bother asking General Washington. He's lost nearly every battle he's fought against the British. Some congressmen and army officers think I should replace General Washington as commander-in-chief. Victories tend to raise morale, you know.
What led to the improvements in the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
I don't know exactly what led to the changes. I was busy serving as president of the new Board of War. As president of the Board of War, I appointed the Marquis de Lafayette to be in charge of the invasion of Canada, but his loyalties are with General Washington.
When did the improvements to the morale and discipline of the Continental Army occur?
Yes, I've heard there have been important changes in the Continental Army. The changes began when the Prussian general arrived, February 23, 1778. Morale and professionalism improved throughout the late winter and into the spring.
Where was the Continental Army when it improved in morale and discipline?
The location was chosen for a good reason. Here's the story. After General Washington lost Philadelphia to the British, Congress moved to York. Congress wanted the Continental Army camped somewhere between them and the British.
Why was it so important that the morale and discipline of the Continental Army be improved?
If America is to win on the battlefield, the troops must be disciplined. It appears that the troops have been taught how to maneuver on the battlefield, giving them a better chance of success.
A packing trunk. Many people use these for storing important items when they travel.
I'm waiting for Thank you. I'm very eager to unpack. It's good to be back here with General Washington and his troops. I've sent a messenger to General Washington. You may speak with him if you wish.
Who helped improve the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
I've been focused on preparing for battle. I was appointed by General Gates to be in charge of a campaign against Canada. I discovered that General Gates only appointed me to the position in hopes of shaking my loyalty to General Washington. General Gates wants to replace General Washington as Commander-in-Chief, but my support will always be with General Washington.
What led to the improvements in the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
When I first arrived, the unfortunate soldiers were in want of everything, and the camp was unsanitary. Now the camp is tidy, and an orderly training method has improved the discipline of the soldiers.
When did the improvements to the morale and discipline of the Continental Army occur?
It was while I was away that the changes occurred.
Where was the Continental Army when it improved in morale and discipline?
It's an excellent location. Since the British are occupying Philadelphia, Congress has moved to York. The location is between the two towns. It's close enough to Philadelphia to allow us to monitor the British. The place is known as Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It's about 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia.
Why was it so important that the morale and discipline of the Continental Army be improved?
Improved conditions should convince many soldiers to remain loyal to General Washington. When the Continental Army leaves its winter camp, it will be a strong, disciplined fighting force. This military strength, combined with the French alliance, will put the British in a panic.
I must find my knapsack. Thank you. This knapsack contains medicine I made from the silk of corn. Corn has many uses, you know. Would you return the portfolio I just set down to General Washington? He left it here in camp. It's full of important papers, and he must be missing it.
Who helped improve the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
Morale was low because the soldiers were cold and hungry. We Oneidas walked hundreds of miles to bring corn to these soldiers when they were starving.
What led to the improvements in the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
I don't concern myself with military matters. My concern is that the men be fed. Most of the Oneidas left after the corn was delivered. I stayed behind to teach the soldiers how to prepare the corn, but I was too busy to notice much else around me.
When did the improvements to the morale and discipline of the Continental Army occur?
Yes, there does seem to be an improved spirit in the soldiers. The arrival of this year's spring brought schools of shad to the river, and with it a new confidence to the soldiers.
Where was the Continental Army when it improved in morale and discipline?
The Oneidas have lived and farmed on land north of here for many hundreds of years. This place is called Valley Forge. It lies just east of where Valley Creek and the Schuylkill River join together in Pennsylvania.
Why was it so important that the morale and discipline of the Continental Army be improved?
When the Americans leave, I will begin my journey home. The Oneidas have sided with the Americans. Congress has promised to protect us. This new discipline makes an American victory likely.
A portfolio containing what looks like rather important papers. The soldiers have such admiration for General Washington. No one else could have held the army together under such hopeless conditions.
I think there may be some in Congress who fear he's too popular. They don't want to trade an English king for an American king. Hello, General Washington. We meet again.
We're always honored to have the opportunity to speak with the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army.
Sarah, James, it's good to see you both.
We have heard that there have been great improvements in the morale and professionalism of the troops.
Yes, there were many times when I feared the army would surely disintegrate. But now the soldiers are confident and disciplined.
Can you tell us more?
I'd be happy to tell you all about it. First, however, I must complete a report to Congress. Unfortunately, I left my portfolio somewhere in the camp. You know, a packet of my important papers.
We could look around and bring it back to you.
Thank you. I'll get that paperwork finished and off to Congress right away.
Who helped improve the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
The soldiers were discouraged because of lack of provisions, but I do not wish to throw blame upon any person. My men were nearly naked and starved. I wrote to Congress warning them that unless supplies arrived, the army would dissolve. When General Nathaniel Greene accepted the post of Quartermaster General, supplies finally began to flow regularly into camp, which helped morale.
What led to the improvements in the morale and discipline of the Continental Army?
The soldiers were starving because Congress let the Army's supply system fail. In the rest of America, people were feasting. The arrival of a Prussian officer to help with training turned this army into a unified fighting force. The arrival of the new Quartermaster General allowed supplies to flow regularly into camp. News of France forming an alliance with America further boosted morale.
When did the improvements to the morale and discipline of the Continental Army occur?
There were 3 months of hardship. Morale began to improve in February of this year, when von Steuben arrived.
Where was the Continental Army when it improved in morale and discipline?
Some have questioned why I selected such a cold location for our winter encampment. The area is easy to defend, since we have a good view of all attack routes. Plus, we're close enough to Philadelphia to keep an eye on the British.
Why was it so important that the morale and discipline of the Continental Army be improved?
Many soldiers died here, but I believe this place will be remembered for what was accomplished. The Continental Army will leave this winter encampment as a well-equipped, well-trained military force. We're much better prepared to stand up to the British.
Welcome back. Try to pick the best quotes from your notebook pages. Select feedback. Good work. This is the layout area, where you can make your newspaper front page look just the way you want before you print it out. Choose a sketch for your front page and type in a headline. Publish the paper once you are finished. The harsh winter at Valley Forge could have spelled the end of the American army, but instead, they have emerged stronger and better trained. Let's get this story published so our readers can learn of this amazing turn of events. Your story about Valley Forge was very interesting and informative. I'll hurry a copy down to the harbor. A ship is leaving for France this evening. Hopefully, Ben will get this news by next month.
After all that has happened in the last few years, I feel that things are building to a conclusion. First, the amazing transformation of the American army at Valley Forge. And now, the British decision to focus their military attention on the southern colonies. With Benedict Arnold becoming a traitor and now ravaging Virginia, not to mention Lord Cornwallis and his army heading towards Yorktown, Washington and his French allies have their hands full.
Rumors abound of the generals on each side moving their troops like pieces on a giant chessboard. And like chess, the decisive move may come at an unexpected time. I want you two packed and ready to leave at a moment's notice.
We'll be ready, Moses.
As reporters, you'll have to ask the right questions and get the facts and opinions that make the most accurate and interesting story. As a matter of fact, an exciting assignment has just come in. You'll find it over on the bulletin board.